Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to be here again at MiningMaven to present to you this evening. Story is Ariana Resources, gold-focused Turkish exploration company moving towards mine development, primarily in Western Turkey. AIM listed since 2005. We're also on Plus, but we're focused primarily on the Republic of Turkey. Turkey is one of the up-and-coming mining gold-producing nations in Europe. It is actually the premier gold-producing nation in Europe, and we're expecting this year for 25 tons of gold to be produced from 5 operations. So the country's come a long way over the last 5 or 10 years, from no gold mines to 5 functional gold mines. And a lot of the difficulties that Turkey faced in the early years have now been overcome on the environmental side. Our main focus project is what we call Red Rabbit. It comprises 2 sectors, Kızıltepe and Tavşan. Our primary attention at this point in time is on the Kızıltepe sector of the Red Rabbit project, and I'll go on to talk about that in a lot more detail later on. Across the project area as a whole, we have 448,000 ounces gold equivalent. Much of that resource is gold, but there's also silver there. That joint venture project is structured 50-50 with our project partners Prosir Construction. It's a Turkish construction and engineering firm with a specialization in gold plant design, construction and commissioning. They're earning into that JV to eventually take them up to 50%. Separate to our focus on Western Turkey, we're also looking at northeastern Turkey through a joint venture with European Goldfields, funding the exploration there. And we have 49% ownership within that. Separate to that, in southeastern Turkey, another split of the company, we have a 13% holding in a private venture called Tigris Resources. So that's focusing primarily in the Kurdish areas, Kurdish dominant areas of southeastern Turkey. Over the years, we've built up a very good management team, both in Turkey and over here in the UK. We pay very special attention to and special sensitivities to Turkish culture, and I am half Turkish. My father's on the team out in Turkey as well as general manager of our subsidiary, so we really understand how things work in the country. And our strategy as a company hasn't changed over the years. We've always had our attention focused on gold mining to get the company all the way through from early stage exploration, prospect identification, resource development and growth, and then into development stage, and we will become a mining company. We've also, over time, utilised our expertise and that regional knowledge, that understanding of not only the geology, but the business environment in Turkey to our advantage. The other thing that we've done is that we've looked at developing JV structures or other partnerships that will maximise the potential return to the company and its shareholders. Our exploration focus has always been from the start to identify large deposits. Large deposits, discovering such things does take time. It takes patience. That's the nature of this game. We know that they will take time, and we're investing in that process. And we've been through an extensive regional sampling program over the course of the last year in particular. And this has geared us perfectly with respect to license auctions in Turkey, which are due to be initiated in January of next year. Meanwhile, our target still remains on entering production on the Kızıltepe sector in late 2012. Key facts concerning the company, current shareholder structure there. Share price has gone up a little bit, and in terms of major shareholders, still European Goldfields, largest single shareholder. Separate to that, Bruce Rowan and Starvest, if you consider them concert, the largest holder. My background is in geology. studied here, did a PhD in the University of Western Australia in gold metallogenesis, worked out in Zimbabwe and in Australia before getting involved in the establishment of Ariana Resources. My focus has always been in gold exploration. That's my passion in life. Michael Spriggs, our chairman since prior to IPO. Michael de Villiers in the back there. Also with us since prior to IPO, providing, in Michael Spriggs's case, that background in geology, the geology aspect. He spent a lot of time with some of the larger mining houses, Anglo-American, Falconbridge, Rio Tinto, and latterly as a mining analyst. Michael de Villiers on the finance and accounting side. And William Payne joined us as a director last year, but he is our CFO. So looking at the breakup of our projects, over here we have Red Rabbit gold project split between Kızıltepe and Tavşan sectors. On the exploration wing, we're looking at Red Rabbit gold project expansion, so that's exploration and resource development. Regional project identification, that relates or plugs into all the work that we've been doing in the background on the exploration in Western Turkey, as well as looking towards the acquisition of new licenses through auction, and our involvement in Tigris Resources in southeastern Turkey, and the European Goldfields JV arm. So this is how things are split up geographically. We're focused primarily there, Western Turkey, European Goldfields up in the northeast, and Tigris down in the southeast. So looking at Red Rabbit project, we've actually taken this project all the way through to trial mining already. It was a very important step for us to take to demonstrate that there was value and merit in this deposit as a mine. We extracted 5,000 odd tons of material and trucked it to the Etigümüş processing plant for processing. That gave us a lot of useful information on the mining side, information that we're now plugging into our feasibility, and also on the processing side. And it was actually through that that arrangement that we ended up meeting our now project partners, Prosea, because Prosea built part of the new processing plant at Etigümüş. Separate to that, we're continuing with exploration across the Kızıltepe prospect. We've identified 2 new vein systems, primarily identified through geophysics, but we're now going on, we're planning a drilling program across those vein systems to further define them. Kızıltepe itself is a low sulfidation epithermal vein system. What this means is we've got quartz veins that have gold and silver in them. They're quite steeply dipping, varying between a couple of meters to 13 meters wide. It sort of pinches and swells along a structural corridor. And we've got several parallel veins across the region. Current resources stand at 232,000 ounces gold equivalent. The graph there just shows the makeup of that resource. A lot of the resource at Kızıltepe is in measured and indicated, and this is essentially what's going to take us all the way through to final feasibility. So actually the resource is good to go. The resource work and the resource component of the feasibility study is fixed. All the work necessary on that is complete. But of course, that resource is only defined on a portion of the total vein system across that project area, and there's plenty of scope to define additional satellite resources in the vicinity that we can establish small open pits on that can feed into the central plant as mining progresses. The Tavşan sector is a separate mineralized system. It's slightly different. It's a gently dipping sheet of low-grade gold mineralization. That would have to be developed on the tail end of Kızıltepe, and it would also have to be developed as a heap leach type operation. So we're continuing further development work on that, and of course we need to bulk up the indicated and then get some of the resources into measured there at Tavşan. So this is an overview over the project area as a whole. So this is what we call the Red Rabbit project area. Kızıltepe down here. So this is where we'd established the plant. and then satellite prospects at Kepez and Karakavak. Another project that we picked up from AIM-listed Kefi Minerals, Kızılçukur. So all of these have the potential to feed into the eventual plant there. And off in the distance there, the Tavşan property. The distance between Kızıltepe and Tavşan is 75 kilometers as the crow flies. I thought I'd include this slide initially. There are aspects of this that have changed a little bit, and I'll go on to talk about some of the more important changes. But the scoping study is a public document. We defined the project, or the merits of the project as a whole in the scoping study. At that time, we established that we could produce about 20,000 ounces gold equivalent per annum over a mine life of approximately 7 years. But the PFS has now updated that to 8 years with a slightly changed mining rate, and I'll go on to talk about that later. The scoping study also estimated cash costs at $441 to $472 an ounce. Now, an increase is expected in that primarily because of increased fuel costs in Turkey affecting the contractor mining rates. Initially, we were getting quotes for the scoping study at just under $2 per metric ton. That's likely to increase as we go into feasibility. But at the scoping level, using a then current gold price of $1,350 as our limit, upper limit on gold price, we had payback on the project in 1.2 years with those sort of cash costs. Now, with plant construction, we're looking at first half of 2012 after permitting. We're in the process now of getting certain documentation ready for submission to the Ministry of the Environment and Town Planning. We're finalising that, we'll get that submitted, and then the first quarter of next year will see us go through that permitting process formally. We're expecting plant construction to take about 6 to 8 months. This is the block model of the optimised pits. You can see that Arzu South contains a lot of the high-grade material. This is essentially the payback pit. The project functions primarily off the Arzu South pit alone. The other pits, Banu, Derya, Arzu North, are all subsidiary, and we also have another subsidiary vein called Kepez, which I showed you in a previous slide. All of those resources can probably be expanded. You can see that there's room to grow the pits a little bit, and these pit outlines were at the previous $800 level. We've gone on to full design pits at the higher gold price of $1,058 that we used for the pre-feasibility. On that point, Wardrop are now advising us that we have to revise our gold price scenario to about $1,140 an ounce, which we'll be doing for the feasibility study. So these are the in-pit resources that come out of that block model and the Whittle pit optimization. In fact, in this case, this is the resource based on the fully designed pits. So these pits are ready to go. So there's been a slight increase from the scoping figure of 108, I think it was, 108,000 ounces of gold to 118,000 ounces of gold, an increase of about 100,000 ounces of silver as well. Although we've had a slight reduction in grade, both of gold and silver, but we get more tons out, which is good for the plant. Our cut-off has also dropped. Previously, our cut-off for the scoping study was 1.3 grams per ton. It's now 0.96. But you can still see that the figures that we're using at the PFS level are probably conservative at this stage. So this is one of the main things that came out of the pre-feasibility study that we're doing. And this was announced earlier this week. I've already spoken about the increase to the resource, but this is how it breaks down in terms of the mining schedule, now across 8.1 years, so we go into the 9th year. Now, the important thing is the first 5 years of operation. We're going to be averaging about, well over, in some cases, 20,000 ounces gold equivalent per annum, particularly in these 3 years here. In the 6th year, it starts to tail off a little bit, but by then, 6 years is a long time. By then, the expectation is that we'd have built up other resources on some of the subsidiary veins. So we'll be continuing to feed in new resources into the tail end of mine life. So the project is looking as though it's feasible as it stands. We need to do a bit more work for the full feasibility study to demonstrate that, but it's looking good so far. And then whatever we can do on the exploration side to identify these new resources is a bonus. This is the pre-feasibility site layout. There's not going to be very much change to this now in the feasibility study. This is essentially what we're going into the feasibility study with in terms of the way everything is distributed across the site. Arzu South main pit, Banu, Derya, Arzu North subsidiary pits, waste rock dump that is primarily taking the waste out of Arzu South, but the intention then is to use Derya, Arzu North and Banu as we open them up to backfill part of Arzu South. So eventually there'll be very limited impact. It will be Banu, Derya, Arzu North that are left open, Arzu South essentially closed, and a small new hill that appears. The tailings dam tucked up in another valley out of sight. This is another important aspect of the PFS study, is the full process layout. So this is work that's been undertaken primarily by our project partners, Presea, with the input of Wardrop. So this has all been independently reviewed by Wardrop. So what we're using here, conventional crushing grind up here. Rotary cone crusher there into a ball mill, and then into this section here is the CIC carbon in column circuit, and then we come into a CIL, conventional CIL circuit down here. The intention is to recover as much of the gold as possible from here and recover the remaining gold and a lot of the silver in the CIL circuit. So this will maximize our gold and silver recoveries in the process as a whole. Then it goes on to the carbon elution columns, electrowinning cells here, and then out into the gold room and eventually our gold doré with the tailings out into the tailings dam there. And a lot of that of the solute comes back into the circuit. So this is actually fully designed now. This is good to go for the feasibility. This is not a pre-feasibility design. This is final. So you can see we've advanced the project tremendously, and we're actually ahead of a PFS level, in fact. So now to talk a little bit about the joint venture development and the structure of the joint venture. I mentioned it will be a 50-50 joint venture once Presea have earned in. In order to earn in, they have to have spent $8 million. We're in phase 1 of that joint venture now to get us to the end of feasibility and the environmental impact assessment. Phase 2, which we'll be initiating next year, will focus on the management associated with getting the construction and the build complete. Presea will commit a further $6.6 million at that time, and the difference between 6.6 and about 25 million or so, the intention is to seek perhaps a debt facility from a Turkish institution, a Turkish bank ideally, to finance the rest. Now, I mentioned further drilling. That's planned. That will be completed during this quarter as we go into the winter and into early next year. And the intention in that is to define those new resources. Anything that we find out of the immediate Red Rabbit project licenses, we can sell into the joint venture at 3 times exploration cost, and that's at our discretion. Now this is just a summary of some of the new discoveries, the new veins which we'll be drilling. Fidan, Gamze, there's also another vein that we've defined in here. But there's scope to identify further resources also in this gap zone through the forest there. And outside of Kızıltepe, so that map I just showed you is focused on that. Outside of that, we've got the Kepez and Karakavak prospects. We completed geophysics across those earlier on this year. We've defined new targets, and we'll be drilling at those locations as well. We've got a fairly extensive drilling program planned. The broader exploration strategy across Western Turkey as a whole, really this is an ongoing process, but a lot of the work was done earlier on this year and part of last year. It's defined multiple targets, and we're now in the fortunate position of having a database that we're able to use with all the auction license data to target those licenses that have most value to us as a business going forward. So we're expecting to participate in those auctions in January, February next year. Meanwhile, Tigris Resources in southeastern Turkey is essentially doing the same thing. Now on to European Goldfields. European Goldfields have been drilling pretty much continuously for much of this year. They're still working. The progress and what I've seen so far is very encouraging. And I'll go on to talk about some of the previous results that have been announced last year. But I'm happy with what I've been seeing this year, although nothing is yet announced on that. The joint venture is fully funded, as I mentioned, by European Goldfields. They committed $3.2 million over the last couple of years. By the end of this year, we'd have spent easily $2 million. We're currently at 49%, but if we get one of the projects to a definitive feasibility study, we'd be diluted to 20% of projects that we vended into the company at the outset, or 10% of any new projects that are identified in the course of exploration. After that, funding would be pro rata. And then if we're diluted below 5%, we'd just adopt an automatic 1.5% NSR. But European Goldfields are doing very well there. They've identified other opportunities across northeastern Turkey, and they are targeting additional projects within that region. So these are some of the results from the Sullenbosch area. Ardalı is a porphyry centre. It's what we focused on initially. It's a copper, gold, molybdenum porphyry system. But the thing that's exciting us most of all is this Sullenbosch target, which is up on the top of the hill there. An early work, trenching primarily, defined a significant gold anomaly, 55 metres at 7.8 grams per tonne. They went on to do more trenching, and all of these trenching results are really quite exceptional. They've gone on to do drilling. These are the drill results that were announced last year. And again, these drill results are quite exceptional. So the fact that they've continued with work and they've been drilling fairly extensively over the course of this year is a very encouraging sign. Key project timelines for the company as a whole. On the exploration side, we've got ourselves all the way through the BLEG work, the regional geochemistry, the modelling. We're now looking at further follow-up ahead of the license auctions, and then we get into license auctions with the intention of picking up some of this new ground, and then we explore that new ground. And the beauty is that we've got our own drilling rig, our own drilling team. We can send in a rig whenever we want to drill a new target. It's not a problem. We've got absolute flexibility. On the Red Rabbit joint venture, we've completed a lot of this work, as I've mentioned. We are initiating a new drilling program fairly soon, and then we're going to go on towards the tail end of this year to complete the environmental impact assessment, complete the feasibility study, and then we get into the permitting phase, and then plant construction thereafter. European Goldfields, just watch this space, but interesting stuff going on. So the future, we strongly believe that we are a very focused company. We're absolutely dedicated to what we're doing in Turkey, particularly with what we're doing at Red Rabbit, and with the partnership that we have with Prosea. It's a very robust partnership. We've got to share an understanding about how to develop the company, and we complete each other as partners. We provide the geological expertise, they provide the plant design, build expertise. So it's sort of, hand in glove type affair. It's very good. We'll get the feasibility EIA completed at the end of this year. On the feasibility side of things, we're looking towards final feasibility, but in order to get there, although a lot of the work's been done, there's one potential delay factor, and that's the tailings storage facility design. And that delay factor is primarily a result of changing regulations in Turkey that have happened this year. So we're managing our way around that. So we've got to go and get those tailings storage facility designed towards the tail end of this year. and then perhaps some more engineering type drilling, so geotechnical, hydrological drilling in the tailings dam site early next year before we can plug that into the rest of the feasibility. A lot of the early documentation for the environmental impact assessment is also well underway. We'll get that submitted soon. And then the formal process for the environmental aspect, the environmental permitting, will start now. We haven't taken our eye off the rest of the exploration program across Western Turkey. And we've got to identify new resource opportunities, both within the Red Rabbit project area, but also wider Western Turkey, with the eye on identifying a single standalone opportunity that we can then go on to develop post Red Rabbit. Also to consider other options, other joint ventures or other initiatives in Turkey. I think we've developed a pretty good reputation there. People are coming to us. It's a good thing. It's a good position for us to be in. And of course, never take our eyes off the end game, which is to become the next formal gold producer in Turkey. So thank you very much for your time. There are some presentations here. Well, they seem to be fairly popular this evening, but they're there for anyone that wants more information. It's the same presentation, so if you want to get any further detail, please. And any questions?
What is your share in the capital cost of getting Kizil Tepe into production, and how are you going to do this?
The answer to that is, if we were doing it on a pure equity basis between the two partners, it would be 50% of 18, so $9 million is what we'd be looking at. But the intention is not to do that. The intention is to use our joint venture company that we've established in Turkey to seek the debt facility. And discussions have already been initiated with various institutions to do that. So there won't be recourse to the partners, although we're not going to rule out potential additional equity if it makes sense in the finance structure to do that.
A little bit more about the background on Presea, your joint venture partners on the Kizil Tepe project.
They've built up a reputation for designing, building and commissioning gold plants, both within Turkey and in the wider region. They've been involved in various full plant builds as well as component builds for processing plants. They're also backed and have technical support from Summit Valley in Utah. So there's a lot of technical expertise that's being drawn on from the States. And then they've got a very competent core team in Ankara that deals specifically with gold plants. The rest of Presea as a firm is a construction firm. They're into all sorts of things, hotel construction. They've also been involved in building barracks for the Afghan army in Afghanistan, and a whole variety of other construction projects. But their intention within their plant design metallurgical unit is to get more directly involved in the mining game rather than just be contractors and consultants. And they see an opportunity. They clearly see an opportunity in what's happening in the gold price, and to do it in their own backyard in Turkey as a Turkish construction firm makes a huge deal of sense. Now, of course, they lack the expertise that we have, which is the geological component, and the understanding of how to build a resource, the process that you have to go through to develop a mine, and they've drawn on us, and of course we're drawing on them with their expertise.
How much cash do you have, and what are your cash requirements, particularly in light of the licence auctions that you're going to participate in early next year?
The answer to that is a cash position is £1.2 million currently. Separate to that, we have a Cedar standby equity distribution agreement to the tune of just short of £5 million currently. So there's a lot of flexibility in the Cedar with regard to what we do in the auctions. So we don't have to draw down on remaining cash resources. We could use the Cedar in an intelligent way as and when the auctions initiate. So we're well financed at this point in time, and certainly for all the work that we're planning to do in terms of drilling on the project. in terms of what we see ourselves doing in early next year on additional exploration on potential new projects. So it's really about, you know, what we need to do to utilise something like a Cedar for the purpose of the licence auctions. Thank you.